After an unexpected physical encounter, the relationship between Kalai and Camden begins to change. As Camden's care goes beyond Kalai's expectations, her heart stirs with unprecedented ripple. However, Amber's sudden appearance and her affectionate behavior towards Camden leave Kalai feeling confused and jealous. Amidst the complex interpersonal relationships and power dynamics of the village, how will Kalai and Camden face their feelings and the upcoming trial? Chapter 11. The first order of business was visiting Zeller in the dragon healing pen in the morning. He was still chained down where I had left him, but they had released his head so he could move it freely. He was in a deep sleep when we approached the fence. Camden stopped me before I could climb over the fence to see the large dragon. Is it safe? He whispered, eyeing the dragon warily as if he was pretending to sleep and waiting to attack when we got close. However, I knew a sleeping dragon when I saw one. They only breathed that deeply when they slept. It was only last night he was rearing to kill you, Talon and Amelia. He was in pain. I told him at a normal volume. Dragon's ears were so delicate. Whispering wouldn't make a difference. He'd hear us all the same. The healers said they removed the bone last night, and he's been a big baby since. Besides, if he tries to kill me, he won't get any jerky. I shook the bag I bought on our way here, positive he'd wake up, and he did. The dragon unfurled his head from the nook of his legs and looked right at me. His eyes drifted to the bag. Drool dripped from his jowls. Hey, big boy.
I swung over the fence, ignoring Camden's hesitations, and skipped to the blue dragon side.
The healers told me you were good last night. As promised, I brought you some jerky. He didn't need any more prompting, opening his mouth wide. I tossed a piece onto his tongue. He swallowed, purred, then opened his mouth for more. Greedy dragon. I peered over my shoulder to Camden, who was slowly making his way over, as if he feared his presence would set the dragon off again. Do you want to feed him? In the overcast lighting, his hair wasn't as lively with color today, sticking to its dusty-colored nature, but his scaled jacket shimmered all sorts of colors, despite the sun hiding behind the clouds today. He stood a good couple of feet away and held his hands behind his back. I'm good. My heart sunk at the doubt in his eyes when he watched me feed Zeller. He might have admitted he needed me to find a dragon, but that didn't mean he was entirely confident I could control a beast that could easily squish both of us in 2 steps. After a few more pieces of jerky, I hit all of his pressure points again so he could move. Once he was released of his bonds, I bid him goodbye with a quick scratch to his eyebrow before gesturing for Camden to follow me back home where Isolde is awaiting our return. Now it was time to teach him how to fly. If we had to fly around the valley to find his partner, I wanted to have my own dragon. It would become exhausting quickly having him hold on to me as we winded between the mountains. Besides, he had to learn how to fly at some point. Might as well streamline that process a bit, since finding him a partner was actually going to be difficult. We spent a good couple hours going over how to saddle up on Elifuser.
Once he had it down, I enticed dragons to my backyard with the promise of jerky, waving it around to distract them while Camden climbed up their back.
The only problem, however, was that as soon as he sat in the saddle, they threw him off and flew away. The only dragon who hadn't done that was Elizur, because I'd asked really, really nicely and promised chin scratches. I sighed heavily, watching Riley buck Cam off, hissed dangerously at him, then take to the skies with the saddle. That was the 4th one so far. I was running low on saddle. I'd have to hunt the dragons down and take our equipment back before we could do more training at this rate. Kicking a rock in frustration, Camden made his way over to me and leaned against a fence post. He rubbed his creased forehead agitatedly. He'd taken his dragon scale jacket off a few hours ago, leaving him in a tight long-sleeve shirt that left very little to the imagination. Not that I was complaining. The view was most welcome. It was the best damn view in the valley. I don't understand. He gripped, staring at the spot. The dragon had been standing proud and eager for jerky. Why do they keep flying away? I haven't done anything to them. It was strange. Dragons liked some people more than others, but all of our dragons so far hated Camden. They wanted nothing to do with him. They'd puff black smoke whenever he got close. trip him with their tails or straight up take one look at him, then leave. They don't respect you.
Yeah.
I replied thoughtfully, tapping my chin. I'm not sure if it's because of the way you treated me when you arrived or if it's something else. Elizabeth, what do you think? She was lying down behind us on the other side of the fence, watching amusingly as dragon after dragon dismissed the prince. Her green scales shimmered in the sun today, dazzling us with her mystic beauty. Camden rolled his eyes. Why would how I treated you affect my bonding chances? Because I'm one of them. I replied simply. He stared at me blankly. You're not a dragon cop. No, but they respect me as one of their own. I socialize with them more than anyone in this village. Do you? I might not be bonded to any of them, but I have a connection with them. And can you understand, Elazar, with this connection? I chose to ignore the mockery in his tone and turn to my friend. She narrowed her yellow eyes on him and stuck her forked tongue out at him. I patted her face in comfort. No. But she can show me, but I think I've found the problem. You don't respect dragons. He crossed his arms, scowling at me. His ash blonde hair was almost long enough to tickle his eyes, give him 2 more weeks here, which was likely at this rate, and he'd have a full mop of hair in his eye. A part of me was curious to see if it'd look as attractive as I imagined. Yeah, boy, that's not true. Dragons are formidable creatures. They deserve every ounce of respect a human can give them. Because they'll squash you if you don't, I guess. He picked up on my accusatory tone and shifted his weight, glancing at Elisor guiltily. He raked a hand through his hair, chewing his bottom lip. If you want to put it in such simple terms.
Yeah.
In my family, your dragon partner is an extension of you, the power we couldn't demonstrate before the bond. We respect them for allowing us to share that power. Clearly, that is wrong. He added to my disappointed glare. I don't know how your brothers got bonded, if that's how your family views dragons, but that's not gonna work for you. Dragons are so much more than power and magic. They're gentle, loving creatures who love their families as much as we do. They live ordinary lives as we do. Dragons are our equal. If we're going to continue further, you need to understand that. I'm trying, but they're just animals. Kyle, I can't see them as any different. Then I guess that's it. For today, he stepped for me, grabbing my arm before I could move away. Elisor sat upright and growled at him. I raised a hand to stop her. What do you mean? We can't try another dragon. Isn't there something else we could do? Teach me something, Kala. Show me dragons are more than what I think they are. I gave it some thought, staring at his hand, which still held me. It was warm and firm around my forearm, making butterflies tingle in my stomach. I didn't like the feeling I got whenever he touched me, and it was one of the reasons why I wanted to teach him to fly. So I didn't have to feel weak in the knees and all giddy as held me close to his body, as if his life depended on it. That's because it does, numbnuts. Don't be getting any ideas about this prince. As soon as he's learned what he wants from you, he'll leave, and you'll never see him again. It was true. His brothers had formed strong relationships while they stayed here for their training. But as soon as they finished, they left and never came back. Our ancestors could paint as lovely a picture as they wanted, but in the end, my family was still only a tool for theirs. I yanked my arm out of his grasp, clenching a fist at my side to distract myself from the void now hovering over my arm. I guess if you're willing to learn, I started slowly lifting my gaze to his having no idea how long I've been staring at his hand and if I should be embarrassed by it or not. I could take you somewhere. It'll be the most dangerous place you've visited. But if you're going to learn anything about dragons, it should be in the heart of the Randala territory. He gaped like a fish in surprise and horror. You're kidding? No one's stupid enough to risk their hide going that deep in dragon territory. He locked eyes with me. Serious. It's so sad. If the dragons don't kill us for trespassing, the other animals that live there will. I appreciate you wanting to help me out that much, but this is insane. I won't ask you to risk your life for the sake of our blood oath. Just as well. You didn't ask? I told him snoodily. Hands on hips. Besides, it's not that bad. I've been there a few times. He stared face blank. Whether it was out of horror at the notion of me being in the most dangerous place in the world by myself, or if he thought I was lying and was respectfully keeping that opinion to himself. I didn't. Bullshit, the former rules.
It's the truth. I corrected him.
Yeah.
He's registering to Alistair.
She's taken me there and back 5 times safe and sound. It's took a lot of convincing with the wild dragons, but they trust me as much as our colony does.
Oh, listen.
He cocked a dubious eyebrow at me. Seriously, is there anything you can't do? Despite his tone, I took that as a compliment and smiled cockily at him. Aside from being the woman everyone wants me to be. No, not really. What do you say? It'll be fun. He glanced at Xianxia warily, unsure about the excited glimmer in her eye. She loved going to the dragon territory more than I did. Despite what people thought about it being a barren wasteland, it was actually beautiful and teeming with life. She liked going there to meet other dragons and see what their life was like. The first time we went, after seeing how excited and happy she was to spend time with wild dragons, I offered to release her. She wouldn't have any of that, though. We were joined to the hip. It was then when I realized how much I meant to her. I would always treasure her friendship and loyalty. She was the only one who truly been with me through everything. She was the only one who understood me. I'm in, Camden said, a determination filling his eyes when he gazed at me. But you're forgetting one thing. I still can't fly.
I hopped over the fence and wrapped my arms around Elisir's neck. You will if Eli lets you.
Right? She raised her head, briefly lifting me off the ground before I had to let go, and glared at me. Come on! Girl! You want to go back there, right? It's been almost a year since we've gone. I'll match you up with Marco when you're old enough to breathe. At the offer, she lowered her head, a soft purr rumbling out of her throat. Her jaws rippled as the sound slipped between her teeth and lip. It was an attempt at her mating call. It would be far more beautiful when she was of age, but lately she'd been practicing a lot and it was showing. Giggling, I rubbed the side of her face. I take that as a yes. Camden looked between us, dubiously tossing his hair away from his face.
Really?
That's all it took. You're going to hook your buddy up with a dragon she fancies. I didn't even know dragons could have crushes or be motivated by sex. I rolled my eyes at him. Of course they have crushes.
I told you.
They're more like us than you think. And, well, sex is a fantastic motivator for any species. His lewd green eyes took liberties with my body, a satisfied smile tugging at the ends of his mouth. It's definitely it. There was no hiding my flush, so I turned to the equipment draped over the fence. Okay. This is the last saddle in our stables. Please don't fly off with it. Elisa. Snorting, she flapped her wings once, bounced over the fence, and landed smoothly in my yard beside the prince. I handed the equipment over to him, roughly, doing everything in my power not to touch him and avoid the tingle down my spine he made me feel. Camden, having had much practice, saddled Elissa quickly and correctly. Boo, she shook her body once he finished to make sure the saddle was secure. It was a small beam of pride surged through me. When he climbed up her leg and settled between her wings, my breath caught. He really was meant to be a dragon prince. He sat in the saddle so naturally. He held his shoulders back, proudly, eyes ahead, waiting to take on the world that would fall beneath him once they took to the skies. Even people in my village who had been around dragons all their lives and flew them almost daily never looked so perfect as he did right now. What Camden catching me staring? What am I doing wrong? I cleared my throat and approached them, checking the position of his heels in the stirrups, then his grip on the handle. Up close, he was just as flawless. Did you ever ride your brother's dragon? I asked in great need to distract myself. He snorted gods. We're not allowed to ride dragons until we come here to be trained properly. Something about avoiding learning bad habits. I tried to talk Liam into it once, but my father found us and made me do charity work for an entire month. Now he added to my offended sneer, I'm all for giving to the less fortunate, but when it comes to organizing the events, it's awful. I'm terrible at it. I'm glad I don't have DP King, leave all that shit to a lot. I'm much happier doing all the grunt work as a dragon prince if I'm ever bonded. He pursed his lips and looked away in shame, withholding a smile from the sass creeping into his tone when he mentioned charity work. I patted his leg in comfort and took note of the fine, firm muscle underneath the riding band. You'll find one. Cam, you'll be the strongest dragon prince. There is. He scoffed, but his eyes gleamed in appreciation. I don't know about the most powerful one. No, I had a feeling the stronger the bond between dragon and rider, the stronger his magic would be. And if he stuck to my teachings, he'd have a very close bond with his partner, just like Elisir. And he was going to do great things. We'll find out soon enough, won't we? Your form is good. You're a natural, really, but make sure you keep it when you take off. The ascent is always the hardest part for new riders. Once Elisir levels off, it won't be so difficult to hold on. Lean into her turns, but not too much. You're heavier than she's to. When you land, relax all your muscles, but the grip on the handle. Hold on, lean, relax, or die. Got it. I couldn't help the laugh escaping my mouth. Start gently, Elisir. I stepped away from them as she nodded. She flapped her wings to give Camden a chance to prepare himself. His lips were pressed tightly together as he held onto the handle so hard his knuckles were white. With one final thrust of her wings, they rose to the sky. Camden swore, pressing tight against her back as they went up and up. She went as high as Mount Campishpian, then leveled off and circled around the village. They were too high for me to see how Camden was doing, but I didn't see any bodies dangling from her back or falling off, so that must be a good sign. Chuckling, Dad came to my side and clapped a hand on my back. He bonded with Ellen. No, I sighed, hopping back to sit on the fence, so my eyes were level with it. We're having problems finding a dragon to bond with him. Not that I blame them. He has a lot to learn about them. All the dragons that usually hang out in the nest have declined him, so we're going to find the rest of the colony in the valley. Has there ever been a member of the Acra family who didn't bond with a dragon? While I thought it was he who held most of the blame, it was possible it could be my fault. My brothers had a different way of going about it. Instead of letting the dragon come to them, they taught the princes how to tame with their whips and chains. And eventually one of the ones they dominated bonded with them, impressed by their strength or whatever the dragon liked about them. I hoped I wasn't dooming Camden by doing things my way, because I truly believe if a dragon chose him this way, they would have a tighter bond than any of his brothers had with their dragon, and it would make both of them stronger because of it. Sensing my unease, Dad rubbed my back more tenderly. It's only been a few days. Child, give it time. Didn't your brothers tell you to be patient? They did, but we've already been through 50 dragons. So there's another 154 dragons left. Have faith in your own guidance, Camden does. As long as you're both doing everything you can to find him a partner, he'll find one. His dragon might not even be born yet, or part of our colony. I overheard you saying you wanted to take him to the Dragonlands. I sat stiff on the fence. No one knew I'd gone to the Dragonlands in the past. If anyone in my family knew that my week-long hunting trips with Elisir were actually us going west, deeper into Randall territory, they'd flip and tell me it was too dangerous. However, there was no rage in Dad's eyes, only curiosity. I've learned a lot about dragons in their homeland. I started slowly waiting for him to lash out at my confession. Still, he remained calm, regarding me carefully and with pride. There was a twinkle in his eyes, which he only had when my brothers worked together to bring down a dragon like Ziller the other night. I eased up and went on. I figured Camden could learn a lot by observing them too. You think his destined partner is a wild dragon? Possibly, he replied coolly, brushing off my confession so casually he must have misheard me. Be careful when you go. I don't need to tell you how dangerous it is, clearly since you've been there a few times. His scrutinizing eyes slid over to me. It would have been nice to know where you actually were, in case something happened to you. I looked down at the muddy grass at my feet. Didn't think you'd approve of No, not real. No one's ever returned from the Dragonlands alive, yet you go by yourself without telling anyone. If something had happened, we wouldn't know where to look for you. Nothing did happen, and my daughter is the first human to return from the Dragonlands. It's hard not to be proud of that. I hugged him, relieved that I wasn't going to be berated because I intended on going to the Dragonlands many times in the foreseeable future. I'll protect Camden, I promised him. Oh.
Train him up before we go, so he'll be able to defend himself on Ellis.
We might not even have to go if we find him a dragon in the valley. Though I secretly hoped I would be able to show Camden the Dragonland.
I'd always wanted to share that experience with someone. He kissed the top of my head.
You know, it's not him I'll worry about while you're up there.
Right.
You can be as tough as any of your brothers, Kalai, but you'll always be my little girl. That prince better watch your back. I peered up at the green dragon flying circles around the village. Images of our journey back from Hystero appeared before my eyes. He didn't even want me as his guide at that point, but he still had my back. As we fought the harpy, he'd even saved my life. He didn't have to, especially since he would have gotten what he wanted, a new guide if he had. He will, or I'll gut him, I laughed. Maybe I shouldn't have, because he was entirely serious, and Camden wouldn't have been the first person to receive that threat. But Dad had yet to have any reason to gut anyone so far, and I doubted Camden would be the first person to give him that reason. Elazar roared in glee as she came in for a landing. She spread her wings wide and landed softly in front of us, shaking the mist off her scales like a dog once her claws touched the ground. Conan slid off the saddle, panting, but with the biggest smile I'd ever seen on anyone. That was amazing. He exhilarated, wiping a hand through his damp hair. Completely ignoring my father, he hugged me so tight. He lifted me off the fence, thank you. I waved it off once he put me down. Beside Dad, there's nothing to thank me for. You were bound to learn how to fly eventually. Next step is finding a dragon in this valley. We'll practice the rest of the week and hopefully start your search on Monday. Remembering Dad was with us, he cleared his throat, stepping away to give me more space and nodded once, holding up his cool demeanor.
Sounds good.
Dad slapped his shoulder, roughly so rough. The poor prince staggered forward and grinned evilly at him. Glad to see you finally recognize my daughter for her talents. He inclined his head to hide the flush rising on his cheek. She is very talented for a woman.
Yes.
His eyes flitted to mine with a sheen of mischief. I punched his arm hard, uncaring if he was teasing me or not. He clearly had to be reminded who was in charge. Rubbing his shoulder, he winked at me. You're as fierce as any dragon.
Carl, you don't need me to remind your own father, dude.
I hit him again, only this time he caught my fist. His smile grew. If you're going to teach me how to fly and all these other amazing things, the least you could do is let me teach you how to fight with form. You're sloppy and predictable. He looked to Dad. If that is all right with you. Dad gripped my shoulder affectionately and grinned at me. If Callie wants to learn, you have my consent. I want her to have everything she needs to survive.
I was about to stick my chin up snootily and decline his offer, but Dad had a look about him.
It wasn't stern or demanding. He was pleading. He wanted me to train, to become stronger. So he didn't have to worry about me while I was out in the mountains with Eleazar. I'd sparred with my brothers and I knew how to fight, but having formal training might give me an edge I needed to make up for my size and lack of strength. Especially against dragon scavengers who were sometimes defected soldiers or mercenaries. I shrugged at the prince.
Yeah, I guess you have to repay me somehow for being so patient with such a hopeless student.
I stuck my tongue out at him. He pushed me, a playful twinkle in his eyes. I stumbled into Dad. Hey, buddy, watch it, Dad. Are you going to let him push me around? Camden stood stiff, forgetting my father was still with us. His arms were crossed, glaring at the prince. But then he shrugged and ruffled my hair. You started it, kiddo. I'm not digging you out of this one. Do what you will, Prince. She deserves every ounce of it. He turned for the house, waving at us over his shoulder. I gaped after him. What was that? He didn't let anyone push me around, not even my brothers. But Camden was allowed to do it. I glared at him. Thank your lucky stars, you're still alive. He just gave me permission to do whatever I want to eat. He gave me a full look over, a devious smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. It's quite the list. Snorting Elizor swept her tail underneath him, tripping it. He fell flat on his back. I laughed at him, tiptoeing around his limbs to my dragon's side so he couldn't see my blush.
Chapter 12. We flew around the valley all day yesterday.
I rode on Madden, one of the more experienced dragons with trainee. He flew below Elisir, ready to catch Camden if he lost his grip on the turns. He never did. Actually, he was a natural in the sky. He obeyed Elisir's needs, leaning more or less pressing closer to her back, so there was less wind resistance. It was the most fun I'd had with someone other than my brother. Most people in my village only flew to get around. They didn't treat it as a fun pastime. Near the end of our flight, I took him to Mount Anchor. After our talk the other night, he seemed a little homesick, so I took him to the highest point on the mountain to view the plains of Walla. We couldn't see Thazaro from here, but he seemed content enough to sit and gaze at familiar territory. He pointed at the village closest to the valley and told me of the shenanigans he and his best friend, Ronan, got up to. Surprisingly, the stuck-up prince wasn't actually stuck up and knew how to have fun. So far away from the castle, he'd take his crown off, very much like how he didn't bring one to Plum and let loose. Start fights with people who were asking for it in bars, horseback riding along the endless plains, hunting, swimming in the river. He was actually quite the adventurer with far more interesting stories than I had to share. I envied him for his freedom. People let him do what he wanted with only minor consequences. He traveled to other kingdoms with his brothers, seen many amazing, beautiful things, met all kinds of people, fought off beasts I'd thought got extinct. Turns out dragons were a bigger deterrent than I thought, and attended extravagant events where people wore the most uncomfortable things to look the most stuffy and rich. And here I was with a dragon to take me anywhere but with nowhere to go. Today I took Camden along the trail through the meadows north from Mount Carter. Elzer loyally joined us, hopping joyfully up the small incline, waiting for us at the top. The path wasn't as used as other trails leading from town. This location was a family secret. The only other person who knew of its existence was Prince Camden, who had trained under Giles 2 years ago. The grass swayed in the gentle breeze, thinning out the higher up the hill we hiked up, giving way to the gravel now crunching beneath our boots. Camden raked a hand through his hair, jacket tied around his waist. Sweat trickled down the side of his face. He licked his lips. Where are we going? I thought you said we were going to fly. The eager twinkle in his eyes to get back up to the skies warmed me to the core. I would be more than happy to oblige him. But first, there were some things I needed to prepare him for. Flying in the valley was dangerous, and he'd undoubtedly have to fight on his dragon as Dragon Prince. We will later, I promised him, but I want to show you something you'll need to know, and it'll be much safer here. He screwed his face up in confusion, but continued to follow without further complaint. The incline finally leveled off, leading to the base of Mount Cartan. There were a bunch of boulders lying about from an avalanche several winters ago. Amazingly, one of the boulders had been so bashed around that it split cleanly down the middle, leaving a flat slide. It balanced perfectly on top of a rounded boulder, piled up over a few smaller rocks that kept it level. After Harry had discovered it, we started using it for combat training. The way it's titled, when you walked along, it mimicked the way a dragon moved mid-flight. It was perfect for new flyers to learn how to balance and fight at the same time safely. Camden's eyebrows scrunched together as he wiped the sweat off his brow. His shirt clung to his back, stained with his effort. A strand of hair stuck to the side of his face. I had to fight the urge to brush it aside.
He did look good, working up a sweat instead of looking like the pre-send-up prince he'd been when I met him.
What's that? I readjusted my ponytail, tying back a few loose strands that had come free from the hike. A freak of nature, but also a training tool. When we fought the harpies on Marco's back, you had trouble holding your balance. Nothing against your skills as a fighter. You're merely used to fighting on the ground, something that doesn't move. You said you wanted to teach me how to fight. You can on this and learn how to keep your balance at the same time. Is it safe? He eyed the small boulder underneath the slab of rock. It was the question on all our minds when we first started using it. But even with all 6 of us sparring on it, it didn't slide off. But was I gonna let him get away with doubting me and tell him that? I shrugged, feigning carelessness probably. I found this a couple months back after an avalanche.
Ignoring his look of horror, I climbed up the boulder beside it, then jumped onto the slab.
Camden barked, stepping toward the daunting balancing act, looking unsure on how he wanted to proceed. Get off that, you're going to get yourself hurt. What?
I cupped my ears, pretending I couldn't hear him, even though I was only 10 feet above him.
I crept to the edge, the slab moving with me, tilting forward at a precarious angle. Panic filled his eyes as they looked around for anything he could find to climb and pull me off safely. There was nothing, Cully. Stop it, get down. I walked right up to the edge, leaning back to keep my balance, and grinned heavily at him. The slab was on a 45-degree angle, and it still hadn't slipped off its counterweight. The panic disappeared instantly, snapping into a sharp glare. He crossed his arms, eyes fierce and unrelenting. This isn't the first time you've used this, is it? I burst out laughing. The peeved look on his face was worth whatever he dared to threaten me to make recompense. Eventually, I managed to compose myself long enough to give him the answer he was still demanding of me. Nope. You're the second person outside my family to know about our training tool. If you can fight on this, you can fight on a dragon. Elisir came up behind him and laid down in a way that also happened to block the exit. There was no escaping my madness. After giving me a look of warning, he climbed up the boulder I'd used and stepped onto the slab. I stood on the opposite end to keep it from moving while he adjusted his footing on it. Once he was sure of his stance, he tossed his jacket onto the ground. Elisir kindly caught it with her tail and draped it over her foot while she watched us contently. As he moved closer to the center, I inched towards the center as well to stop the rock from tipping too drastically for him. Whenever it wobbled, his eyes darted from side to side, expecting it to fling one of us off, and his hands flew out to grab mine reflexively. I'd originally thought it was for balance, but when I shifted my weight to the side, jerking the rock, he yanked me to him, securing an arm around my back, as if to brace me when we went flying off the rock, which never happened. After the first few times, I'd laughed at him and teased him for thinking he could protect me from the aftermath of a 10-foot fall. He felt less inclined to come to my aid and focused more on keeping his own balance. Once he got a feel for the way the slab moved, he corrected a few things in my stance. He noticed during the short time we fought together, it was difficult to listen to him. It certainly took a lot of pride to admit my mistakes. The only thing keeping my mouth shut really was the fact that this would help me become a stronger fighter. It also helped that I had a few pointers for him. The directions he gave me were based on the ground not moving, so I countered and showed him what would happen if I placed my feet where he told me to, if I was on a dragon. Once he fell on his butt, he relented. For days, we hiked up the trail to Tipping Point Harry had named it, thinking himself clever and practice on the slab. Each day, he grew more stable on the rock, and my movements cleaned up.
I might actually be able to beat Casper for once, if we keep going the way we were.
Our back-and-forth dance was fun, almost more fun than flying with it. It was nice to give input and to be listened to. When I sparred with my brothers, they usually told me what I was doing wrong and then attacked me. Most of everything I knew, I had to figure out on my own unless I wanted to be pummeled all the time. It was how we had all learned to fight. No fancy techniques like the ones Camden taught me. When we weren't training at Tipping Point, we were flying and looking for dragons from my colony. We found a few, and they were friendlier towards him than the younger dragons had been, but none of them bonded with him. This morning, Camden's frustration showed as we trained at Tipping Point. When we sparred, we were supposed to pull our punches, but he absolutely did not when his fist made direct contact with my nose.
I hit the ground hard, dazed. The world was suddenly very quiet and white.
Moments passed before I noticed Camden was on his knees beside me, moving hair out of my face so he could see if I was okay. Blinking, I sat back on my butt and patted, had my nose then grimaced at the taste of blood trickling into my mouth. And man, he could throw a punch. I'm fine, I grumbled, feeling the ache run along the bone into my skull. I'm sorry, he blurted, pulling my hands away from my face and holding them tightly together between his. I lost my concentration for 1 second. Cam, it's fine, I told him, trying to ignore the pain when I smiled at his. I've been hit harder? Not really, unless we were counting by dragons, but before we continue, wanna talk about what's on your mind? Before he had gotten that one good shot in, I'd taken advantage of the many openings he'd left for me. Normally, sparring with him was a little more difficult, but today I was kicking his ass. The split lip was just the tip of the iceberg of what I'd done to him for being so distracted. He sighed heavily and sat down in front of me, dropping my hand. His eyes drifted over to Elisir, who was alert, but remained where she was lying near the trail. He bit his lip, squeezing his hands into fists. The longer he held her gaze, the more frustration and disappointment stirred within. Eventually, he had to look away from her and stare at the rock we sat on. My fingers itched to reach out to him, to comfort him, feel his hair beneath my skin. I remained still, waiting patiently for him to say something or nothing. I learned that was best with my brother. Pushing men into talking only made them build up more walls, and I found myself wanting no walls between Camden and I. Once he stopped being an asshole, he was actually a decent person. He was passionate about protecting his people more than I expected from the youngest spoiled child of a wealthy family. Finding his partner was more than bragging rights and magical powers. It was defending the helpless and doing right by the people of Wola who had put their trust in his family. He treated me like a regular person, not a damsel who needed saving or a beastly woman. He was gentlemanly and offered me a helping hand. Whenever I dismounted a dragon, though, I had to take some convincing that he was doing it to be nice, not because he thought I couldn't get off a dragon without help and open doors for me. Who knew it was the small things nobody ever bothered to do for me that would be what I noticed and appreciated the most. Camden pinched the bridge of his nose, then peered over to me and winced. Without a word, he slipped out of his shirt tuck, about to dive for view, and handed it to me, gesturing to my nose. Thankful. I cleaned my face up with it, then held it against my nose to prevent further drippage. I just had this image in my mind on how this was going to go. He confessed, lifting his gaze to the sky. Fluffy white clouds drifted quickly, visible for 1 second, then behind a mountain in the next. Those were the perfect currents for flying. Talon was going to be my guide. He was going to show me the beautiful women my brothers talked so highly about. There would be parties, dancing, and drinking. Then he would take me up to a mountain where I'd find the strongest dragon. He was supposed to be the biggest, pure black like Balthazar, the most badass of the lot. But none of that is happening. He was venting. He didn't mean for it to be a complaint that I was his guide. He'd already made it clear that he saw me as a worthy guide. But I guess I'd forgotten that my brothers had shown the other princes a good time while they were here. They'd trained during the day and had fun at night. Feeling bad that I'd taken away likely the most enjoyable part of the Rite of Passage, I stood up and dusted my pants off. Come on, confused. He jumped to his feet. Where are we going? Home. I'm sure my brothers would love to take you out and show you all the beautiful women you've been waiting for. Because he certainly wasn't going to meet any with me around. The women of my village avoided me if they could help it, gods. Forbid they caught whatever sickness I had to make me so boring. You've been working hard all week. You deserve some fun. His confusion turned into a pout. Clyde, I didn't mean that. I don't like the way things have turned out.
I'm enjoying my time with you.
Let's see your brothers show me the incredible views you've shown me. I looked down at the pebble at my feet, then kicked it. It's all I'm good for. Can't. I know where all the good views are because I don't have anything else to do. My only friend is a dragon. My brothers know where all the fun spots are in Plus. They'll introduce you to a lot of women and people more interesting than me. You'll enjoy your day off a lot more. Trust me. Without waiting for him, I hopped off the slab and went to Elisor's side. She opened up the exit knot that she needed to block it anymore. Camden willingly joined me on the training rock and followed me down the incline. Camden caught up to us quickly. If you insist on giving me the day off, why not join us? He offered with a soft smile that made my innards melt. It didn't help that I hadn't given his shirt back, my nose hadn't stopped bleeding, and that the sun was casting gorgeous statuesque shadows over his washboard up. I don't need bountiful women to have a good time. It'd be enough to just be with your brothers and yourself. I blinked at him in surprise. He wanted to spend his time away from me with me. Wasn't he sick of seeing my face every day by now? My brothers were the only other ones who asked me to go anywhere with them outside of work. Are you sure? I don't want you to feel bad for excluding me. I'll just play with Elisar. Hey, we haven't had a good play in a while. The dragon perked up at that and brushed her muzzle against me. She was so eager. She pushed me too hard. I was knocked into Camden. In an attempt to steady me, he caught my hips, but his heel hit a jutting stone and me running into him knocked him off balance. We went tumbling down the hill. Chapter 13. We rolled down the hill in a heap of limbs and curses until we finally came to a halt at the base of the mountain in the middle. Lucky me, my fall was cushioned by Cam's hard chest. A pained look in his eyes, he moaned and covered his face with his arms. Are you okay? I asked him, sitting up and taking a quick inventory of his body. Aside from a few scrapes from rocks and the bruises I'd given him earlier, he seemed okay. He shifted an arm to peer at me from underneath, aside from my guide trying to kill me. Just peachy. It wasn't on purpose, you brat. I chided, poking his ribs playfully. If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead, said the last guy who tried to kill me. He teased, removing his arms from his face, which revealed a gash just above his left eyebrow. His eye swept over me, finally landing on my face. Concern flitted across his features. Are you okay? He wasn't thinking when he reached up to cut my cheek, right? He couldn't know that his thumb was warm and tender when it brushed under the scratch on my cheek. Men who had their faculties about them wouldn't even think of touching me with such concern, let alone actually do it. He caught a droplet of blood as his thumb followed the length of my scratch. Frowning, he looked around us. Where's my shirt? I peered further up the hill where Elisar was still sitting, watching us smuggle it. That conniving little dragon. She hadn't pushed too hard at all. She knew exactly what she was doing. My face flamed, and I suddenly couldn't bring myself to look at the prince sprawled beside me. I don't know where it went. Sorry, I'll buy you a new one. Shaking his head, he sat up. I don't care. I was going to use it to clean up your cheek. That made me give him a dubious look. What? Oh, this thing, don't worry about it. I'll use the hem of my shirt to wipe the blood away. Here, you can use mine for your wound. His was much deeper than mine, and blood kept dripping precariously close to his eyes. Before he could protest, I was removing my shirt and dabbing his eyebrow. Once he got over the fact I was shirtless, he grabbed my wrist. Kolai, your shirt's ruined. Well, so is yours a missing? We're even here. I made him hold the shirt to his head while I crossed my arms to keep my heat in. Man, he'd made it seem a lot warmer out than it actually was. At least I had a brow on to keep a tiny bit of semblance of warmth. He had nothing. He smiled. Thanks, you really don't mind being shirtless. If you were any other woman, I would have been slapped for scheming this by now. Did you scheme this rather elaborate plan to undress me, Prince? I used his title mockingly and batted my helpless eyelashes at him. If he had somehow devised such a plan, there were far better bodies to undress in the village. He rolled his eyes. No, then I don't need to slap you. I think I've beaten you up enough today.
Come on, let's find you a healer before my dad gives me heck for kicking your ass. I stood up and offered him a helping hand only because I let you.
I patted his chest in mock comfort. Whatever helps you sleep at night, princely. So sassy. It'd make Elisha proud. I spun on my heel in the direction of the village and stopped dead with a groan loud enough for the gods to hear me. Amber was skipping her way over here. She shoved past me, going straight to the prince. Taking advantage of his short estate, she laid her hands on his chest, very conspicuously feeling him up. Your Highness, what did Kalai do to you? Are you all right? Instead of stepping away from her, like I wished he would, he placed his hands on her shoulders.
Kali's done nothing I didn't consent to. What are you doing here, Amber?
She giggled and tapped his chest. I'm here for you, Silver. Amelia had mentioned Giles told her you would be here. I bet that beast has been working you to the ground. I thought I'd come rescue you. I snorted. The only thing he needs rescuing from is your spewing bullshit. Give the man some space. Not every male wants to be fondled by your talent. She threw a sharp glare at me then. She noticed I wasn't wearing a shirt and grimaced. Look who's talking. Put a shirt on, you classless. Nobody needs to see your filthy body. I think you've scarred the prince enough for one day. Come on, your highness. I'll get you cleaned up and show you not everyone in Plum is a savage.
I crossed my arms to hide what I could of my scar-ridden body.
She was a heartless bitch. But she was right. Nobody needed to see that. And I'd forgotten all about my scars when it was just Camden. And that I was just taking him to the healing hut. I snapped, feeling like I was fighting for custody over him rather than sparing him a few hours of her company. You don't need to show him anything. Like, what's under that skirt? I knew if he left with her what they'd end up doing. What man wouldn't want to sleep with her?
She was a part of the beautiful women his brothers told him all about.
Why don't you come with us, Cal? He offered. We can both get checked out. Amber snited. She's not welcomed at the same time. I said, I'm not going anywhere near her. Seeing that the prince had already decided what he wanted, I turned to look up the hill and called for Alice. She glided down the hill and snarled at Amber, curling her tail around me protectively. Amber feigned terrified of the awful beast and hid behind Camden. Rolling my eyes, I swung up into the saddle. Enjoy your day off. Prince, let's go, Alice. The dragon snorted, snapping her head away from Camden, then jumped into the sky with a single thrust of her wings. She was going to head straight for our alcove hidden in Mount Caspian, but I told her to take me home first. The clouds were getting darker and thicker, and I didn't feel like being caught up in the rain without a shirt on. I snuck in through the back door, unsure who would be home at this time. I instantly regretted it. Giles and Amelia were making out on the couch, which had a clear view of the door I stepped through. Squealing, Amelia hopped away from my brother and flushed while Giles calmly stood up to greet me until he noticed my lack of shirt. The lazy smile on his face snapped into a murderous glare. He crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbing my shoulder. Who did this to you? I did. I snapped, pushing him away. We fell down the hill, and I used my shirt to wipe the blood. It wasn't until the well, when he remembered that I was supposed to be with someone. He looked over my shoulder. Where's Camden? I looked away from him with a nasty taste in my mouth. With Amber, I'm assuming she'll get around to healing him at some point. Giles lightened up, releasing me and clasping Amelia's hand when she came to his side. Do you want me to heal you? She asked shyly, still embarrassed about being caught sucking my brother's face. I'd caught my brothers doing much worse when they had the house to themselves. No, I'm fine. I grunted, then slid past them for the stairs. I didn't really feel fine, but she couldn't heal my stupidity away. I don't know why I thought Camden would choose me over Amber to be healed, of course. Sure, she was an immediate means of being fixed up, but I thought he'd at least like the company better. Apparently not. What did I know about men? Anyway, I knew more about dragons than humans.
I didn't realize I was picking up shirts, then throwing them viciously back into the drawer until there was a soft knock on my door.
What do you want? I'm busy. I wanted to be alone so I could beat myself up more thoroughly for feeling the way I did. Amelia slinked into the room and shut the door gently behind her. Her large gray eyes watched me as I struggled to find a shirt I wanted to wear. None of them seemed good enough at the moment. They were all baggy and gross, handed down from brother to brother until I received them. I'd only had one shirt I'd actually liked, the one I'd done a shoddy job of hemming to a more slender fit, which was now covered in blood somewhere in the meadow. Amelia put her hand on mine, stopping me from tearing my clothes up. Do you want to talk about it? There's nothing to talk about, I spat, slamming the drawer shut. Maybe I should go out in the rain shirtless. At least then I would be able to feel something other than this awful feeling in my chest.
With a look of sympathy, Amelia sat on my bed and gestured for me to join her.
I did so reluctantly. She soothed her skirts and faced me. Tell me what happened. I chewed on my lip. What did it matter? What happened? Who cared? I was stupid, and Camden was fucking Amber. What else was there? I told her anyway, because maybe she could help make this pain go away. We finished up training for the day. Alasher pushed us down the hill. I took my shirt off to clean his wounds and offered to take him to the healing hut. Amber showed up, and he decided he was better off with her. I came here because I'd rather gouge my eyes out than watch her feel them up all afternoon. She frowned and thought, tucking a delicate blonde curl behind her ear. Why would Alistair push you two down the hill? Don't know.
I did, but like how I was admitting it, I was trying to forget why.
Moistening her lips, she took my hand and patted it. Last week, you told me to ask you how you felt about Prince Camden later. Well, it's later now. Do you still hate him? No. What do you think of him now? I tore my hand away from hers and stood up. It doesn't matter what I think of him. He's my prince. I will guide him through his rite of passage, then never see him again. Saying it out loud steeled my resolve. It didn't matter what I felt or thought of him because it would never be reciprocated. This feeling I had would go away once he left. The sooner he found a dragon, the better. Thank you, Amelia. I feel better now. Eyebrows scrunched. She stood up and eyed me suspiciously. You do. We haven't really talked Kalai, are you?
Sure.
I snatched a random shirt from my dresser and slipped it over my head. It was silly of me in the first place to even try to look a little more feminine for someone.
Positive. I'll leave you and Giles to your canoodling. Thanks again. Wait. Will you at least let me heal you before that cut gets infected? I slipped past her tiny frame, patting her shoulder. I'm good. It's just a scratch. I ran into Giles on the way to the door. He was half-heartedly blocking it, unsure if he should take his sister's side or his girlfriend's. When I glared at him, he decided it'd be better if he took the side of the woman he lived with. Alyssa was waiting patiently outside, staring up at the forever darkening sky. She perked up when she saw me and nuzzled her face into my chest. I held her for a moment, relishing the heat of her body, the rough texture of her scales under my fingertips, even her smoky scent. She was my anchor to this world, my one true constant, who would always be there for me. Inhaling deeply, I stepped away from her face so I could climb up her back. She fluttered her wings twice, then we were airborne. The rain began halfway up Mount Kazibian, the clouds so thick and dark. It might as well be nighttime, even though we still had a few hours of true daylight and the nocturnal creatures came out to play. There was so much rain. I didn't see the dragon roosting in our spot until Alarazar was about to land. I was even more disappointed to see Camilla had a rider sitting between her front legs. His legs dangled off the ledge as he stared down the long drop to the valley floor. The idiot, black-haired rider lifted his sea-blue eyes to me. He groaned, "What are you doing here?" Talon demanded. He had some nerve using that tone with me. "What are you doing here?" "This is my spot." He sneered at me. "No, it's mine. I found it first." We gestured to Elozor and my chest made it go up. Crossing his arms, he stuck his chin up snoutily and looked forward. No, I was here first. Growling, I sat down on the ledge, Elessa making herself comfortable behind me by wrapping her tail around my waist to stop me from going over the edge.
She gave him the same snooty look he gave me. What are you doing?
He snapped. I want to be alone. Yeah, so do I. It was clear neither of us were budging, so we might as well be alone together. It was actually a good thing he was here. He would keep me in check. I couldn't scream or cry at the heavens if he was here. If I wanted to lament, it would have to be silently hidden within the sheets of rain, dividing us from the rest of the world. The rain was so bad now, I thought I was staring at a waterfall. There was nothing else to see, not even the lights of Plum, which was somewhere down below. To my surprise, Tessie was the first one to pipe up. So, what brings you here? He kept his gaze ahead, intent on the heavy rainfall. Can't stand the prince already. Kadam will be pleased to be a couple coins richer. I snorted, leaning back into Eliezer's chest to keep the cool wind away.
More like Casper won the bet. If Dad hadn't grounded you, I would gladly hand him over to you.
Which I now realize meant Talon wasn't supposed to be up here. He wasn't allowed to ride any dragons until Dad could trust him not to get them killed. Again. That got Talon's attention. He raised his eyebrows at me, then shrugged and went back to staring at the rain. Huh? Who would have thought you were actually a woman under all that sass and badass? So Camden told you you weren't enough for him. Hey, I don't want to talk about it, I muttered. The prince didn't have to tell me I wasn't enough. I knew I wasn't. He was Prince Camden. Acker, for God's sake, no respectable man would want to be seen in public with me. Who knew maybe he'd make Amber his princess and take her away from here, so I could at least try to be happy here. Did he hurt you? Talon's tone had gone several octaves lower, almost into a growl. It surprised me to hear such a protective tone from him, the brother who I thought hated my guts for taking Mom away from him and for being picked to guide Camden.
No.
All right. Then we fell silent. The pitter-patter of the rain against the cliffside was enough for us. It kept my mind calm, stopping me from hating myself too much for the way I was. It wasn't my fault that princes didn't like me. I just wasn't their thing, but there was a man out there who didn't mind that I could kick anyone's ass and rode dragons all day.
I would find that man, just not today, screw what Amber and other women thought.
My body might not be beautiful, but I had other things going for me, and that was what really mattered. I peered over to Talon. Why are you here? He pressed his lips together, fists tightening in his lap. Don't want to talk about it. Do you want to beat the shit out of each other until we feel better? I'd much rather feel physical pain than the ache in my heart. He shrugged, sure. Eliezer and Camilla left the alcove to hang on the cliffside and watch from outside. Talion barely waited for me to stand before he punched my face. I staggered back, hitting the wall. If he was going to play that way, I feigned left, then hooked a right shot into his gut. Groaning, he fell to his knees, and I rammed a knee into his face. He held onto my leg and threw me down, straddling my stomach and throwing an onslaught of punches. I only managed to dodge 2 before he slipped through my defenses. Eliezer growled for me to get up, so I did. I threw him off me, swinging my foot around to connect with his jaw. We stood on either side of the alcove. My face was a throbbing mess, and undoubtedly looked much worse than it felt. Odd. He had a solid bruise forming along his jawline that made me feel better, and his breathing was hitched from when I scored his gut. We grinned madly at each other.
Yeah.
This was so much better than the feeling in my chest. The video is about to end, but the adventure has just begun. Don't go away. Subscribe to our channel, and next time we'll fly even higher.